I'm Mark Golub, and in the news, a range of issues relating to the state of Israel, including the health of Shimon Peres, a virtual founding father of the state of Israel, the immediate former Israeli president, and a former Israeli prime minister, among many of the offices Mr. Peres held in his long and distinguished career of service to the state of Israel. Also in the news, the ongoing discussion of the recent week at the United Nations and the address by Prime Minister Netanyahu, as well as Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. And what a dramatic contrast between the two. Mr. Netanyahu inviting Mr. Abbas to come to Jerusalem to address the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, and offering himself to go to Ramallah to resume peace negotiations. Well, Mr. Abbas says the Palestinians are now going to bring a legal suit against Great Britain for issuing the Balfour Declaration in 1917, 70 years ago. And if anyone's too young to know, the Balfour Declaration was simply a letter the foreign minister of Great Britain sent to Zionist leader Chaim Weizmann, indicating Great Britain's willingness to help create a Jewish homeland in what was then called Palestine for the Jewish people. The Balfour Declaration had enormous symbolic meaning because it reflected a growing world sentiment that the Jewish people have an historic right to the land of Israel. But the Balfour Declaration had no legal status whatsoever, and yet that's where Mahmoud Abbas wants to put his attention and his efforts. And finally, there's a memo of understanding signed into law by President Obama, which will give Israel $38 billion in U.S. aid over the next 10 years. But there are aspects of that memorandum which are quite troubling to members of Congress and to the Jewish community. So lots going on in the Jewish world at this high holiday season, and to bring us some clarity on it all, I am enormously pleased to have on our JBS phones the individual who is truly at the center of Jewish life and the relationship between American Jewry and the State of Israel, Jewish communities as well throughout the world. He's the executive vice chairman of an organization called the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations, which is the umbrella group in American Jewish life. There are more than 50 of the most significant Jewish organizations as members of the Conference of Presidents. So the conference is, in many ways, the voice of American Jewry. It's always a great pleasure to speak to and learn from, again, the Executive Vice Chairman, Malcolm Hoenlein. Malcolm, as always, I thank you so much for being part of JBS.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be with you. And now that your expanded reach, it's long overdue, and God willing, it will continue to grow and cover the earth with the important information that you provide.
Thank you so much, Malcolm. So, Malcolm, you just got off a plane virtually. Where did you come from?
I'm not sure anymore, but I think the last flight, which I took, was an overnight from Denver, where I went to speak to almost 3,000 Christians and some members of the Denver Jewish community in their annual Night to Honor Israel. And it was part of a whole-day program based at Faith Bible Church, which is a remarkable institution. It's a huge plant with a school of 1,000 children, and led by Pastor George Morrison, whom I've known for a long time. When you go into his office, you see shofrot and menorot, a few Christian symbols, and in the church itself, no Christian symbols. It is just plain, as is the case with many of the evangelical churches, and it is an eclectic audience of Hispanics and Christians of all kinds who came out to really celebrate Israel with such joy, such intensity. And I must say, when I get up to speak in front of these audiences, they draw every ounce of energy out of you.
Yes.
It is true at the Kufi celebrations, Christians United for Israel, which they are part of. And they had there, Mark, an amazing display exhibition on the Holocaust.
Really?
About righteous Gentiles and Gentiles that were not righteous.
Wow.
The most amazing thing done by their young people, the students in the schools all wrote up accounts of Jews who were saved, and they talked about their individual cases and about the Christians, including a famous Dutch family who had visited the community a couple of years ago, and they made these videos about it, original.
Amazing.
And it was astonishing
yes.
to go through this exhibition, and it's all done in black. It is clearly a big investment. They worked on it since last March, and thousands of people go through this exhibition as a reminder of the obligation of when evil is left unchallenged, and they translated it into the need to support Israel.
By the way, it is amazing, is it not, Malcolm, how the evangelical Christian community embraces Israel and really all things Jewish. And it is not only the evangelical Christian community, there is a totally different relationship now between the Christian world and the state of Israel and the Jewish people. Speak about that for one moment.
Well, I do think that in large parts of the Christian world there is a different attitude. As you know, the Christian communities in the Middle East are being decimated. We see the persecution and even execution of large numbers of Christians every year now, from Indonesia to Nigeria to other places, with hardly a whimper, certainly no condemnations, no Security Council meetings, all of those who rise up against every perceived wrong wink by Israel. And yet here you have thousands of Christians being killed, hung from the top of cranes in Iran, Coptic Christians, other Christians, let alone Yazidis and others who are being persecuted and killed in the most brutal way, and yet the world still remains silent. And frankly, we do not. We have demonstrated for the Yazidis, and we do speak out for them and for the Christians, and urge the Christian community to do more. But they look now at the Middle East, and they look at all of the concerns and fears they had, and they see the reality today. Bethlehem is 95% Muslim. These other places that formerly had large Christian populations, and the only place in the Middle East where you've had a growth of the Christian population over the last years, decades, is Israel.
Yes.
Everywhere else, they have been diminished. Look what's happened in Syria. Look what's happened in other places. And Israel takes in Syrian Christians as well as Muslims. They risk their lives going into Syria at night to bring them for treatment. Those who are wounded, children, mothers, in the thousands have come to Israel for free, being treated in Israeli hospitals, some staying there for operations, all costs borne by Israel and volunteer organizations like Amalia who help cover the cost for it. And the world rises up in condemnation at the World Health Organization against one country, Israel,
yes,
where this kind of incredible life-risking activity is taking place to take care of people who may one day turn against them. And I want to just add that on the West Bank, there are 500 Israelis who volunteer to take Palestinians and Arabs living in the territories to Israeli hospitals. They go to the borders to pick them up, take them there, and bring them back. 500 volunteers. The Palestinian Authority charges them, the people who want to go for treatment in Israel, and if they don't pay the bribe, they can wait months before they'll get a permit to go into it. Look at this contrast. Who cares about the Palestinians? Who persecutes the Palestinians? And it's imperative that, especially now, we remember that truth, you cannot build peace without truth. You cannot have progress without truth. And the Christians that I spoke to last night and in the past, they talk about it. And they say, we now see the truth. And the role of Israel, the biblical ties, the connections, at a time when you have BDS and others trying to denigrate, deny, diminish, destroy the truth, and say we had no connections, we had no place there.
By the way, you say it so beautifully. And, you know, Malcolm, JBS is on many cable systems. We appreciate every single one of them. Optimum, RCN, Metrocast, Atlantic Broadband, Google Fiber, all of them. But being on DirecTV is going to bring us to not only Jewish communities, but many of the evangelical and Christian communities across the country. And the way you talk about the relationship we have, the Jewish community now has with the evangelical and Christian communities as a whole, I believe is reflected in the enormous number of non-Jews who watch us, who send me emails, who enjoy us. And so what you say is very important for us all to hear. And I want to pick up on one thing you said. You talked about the way in which the State of Israel has gone out of its way to help those in Syria come into Israel and receive medical care. And one of the things that Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke about when he spoke at the UN was the hospitals he has personally made sure have been set up by Israel in the Golan Heights on the Israeli side of the Israeli-Syrian border. That brings me to the entire address that you heard the Prime Minister give to the UN. You heard my comments in the open of the program. What was your reaction to the Prime Minister's talk and content when he addressed the General Assembly of the United Nations?
I think he was reflecting an openness to negotiations. He offered President Abbas to come to Israel to speak to the Knesset and offered to go and speak to the Palestinian Legislative Council. We know that when Sadat came to the Knesset, it was a game changer, and his courage, his reaching out, which we see today President Sisi doing as well, and the delegations that are visiting. And I have to say that as much as we talked about the changes in Christian communities, there are also big changes in Arab and Muslim countries in their attitude towards Israel. That you have delegations from Saudi Arabia, you had security officials from Egypt this week, we have many others who are coming to Israel and letting themselves be seen. It used to be that they would come in the middle of the night and hide, and etc. But now that they let themselves be seen publicly, during the UN week, we met many heads of state from Arab countries, many foreign ministers and prime ministers from Arab countries. And the atmosphere is a very different one because they've come to see that Israel isn't the obstacle, that Israel is part of the answer, that Israel has so much to offer, that, and especially when it comes to confronting what they call the enemy, which is Iran, and the threats that Iran and undermining the regimes, and when they see the Muslim Brotherhood to ISIS, to Hezbollah, to Hamas, and all of the other terrorist organizations. I'm not telling you that that this is yet where we would want it to be, but it has progressed immensely. And I think President Sisi's courageous stand in Gaza against Hamas and publicly declaring his cooperation with Israel, talking about it being mutually beneficial, changing the textbooks in Israel, in Egypt, which now recognize the Six-Day War and the subsequent 73 war, and talks about the creation of the state. These are really significant changes to me, and I see it in Central Asia and the Muslim countries and many other places. Unfortunately, the trend is going to reverse and go the wrong way because they see the weakness of the West and the alienation from the West, and they're being driven into Putin's arms and Rouhani's arms and others. We see a region in total disarray, and this should be of concern to all of us. But the fact is that we are seeing remarkable changes in the East Mediterranean Initiative, where countries coming together and seeing Israel as a hub with all that it has to offer,
yes,
that you can create a whole new atmosphere.
Yes.
And at the same time, UNESCO passes resolutions denying 2,000 years of Christian history and 3,800 years of Jewish history, and takes away all of the Judeo-Christian names of our most sacred places, the Western Wall, the Temple Mount, the Rachel's Tomb, and now has eliminated them completely and uses only the Muslim names, the traditional Muslim names. Muslims have a right to pray at these places and claim them. But the exclusion now of 3,000 years of tradition and of heritage and of connection, when we're witnessing the discovery every day of things that prove the Jewish connection, both the existence of the temples, the where David slew Goliath, they find every day, every shovel in the ground is uncovering our past at a time when they want to take away our past to take away our future. So the challenges are great, and this is something that also unites Jews and Christians when we see this effort to take away our claims, both our mutual claims, and denigrate our religious beliefs and heritage. We want everybody to be able to share these things. That's the beauty and that's the sacredness of Jerusalem. But this ridiculous and obscene actions by UNESCO have to be reversed, and we met with many foreign ministers about reversing that vote and the need for us to come together and to say only if you respect one another are we ever going to be able to change it.
Good for you. Good for you. Malcolm, there are people in the Jewish world here in America, also in Israel, who don't believe Benjamin Netanyahu is really for a two-state solution, and they discount the type of things he said at the UN because they believe he is politically beholden to right-wing elements in his own Likud party and his coalition government, which oppose territorial concessions to the Palestinians. How do you personally assess the Prime Minister's commitment to a two-state solution? What would you have our audience understand about what you believe Benjamin Netanyahu's attitude towards a two-state solution really is?
He went out publicly at Bar-Ilan University years ago. He has reiterated it over and over again, to the dismay of some of his partners, I'm sure. But he is convinced and has asserted that he is prepared to negotiate a two-state solution. The problem is he doesn't have a partner. And Abbas's response at the UN was further reflection of that and further evidence of it, that this is a man who at age 80-plus is not prepared to negotiate, is not prepared to face the difficult choices, does not want to have to make concessions. He walked away from Barak's offer and Olmert's offers and all of the other offers, did his predecessors for the last 100 years. And that is what's preventing the arrival at a serious solution that would meet everybody's needs. I do believe that ultimately that will be the case, that they will come to some sort of a solution. The question is how many lives will have to be paid, how much more terrorism there will be, how many more Palestinians will be denied some of the privileges and rights that the BDS program denies them. It's Palestinians who suffer economically more than Israelis from it. Mm-hmm. The fact that their own leadership is willing to sacrifice the vital interests instead of building them economically, they siphon off the money and it all goes into this corrupt system. So I think it's very easy to blame Netanyahu, and Israel always takes a hit. Doesn't mean we have to agree with everything they do or disagree with some of the things that actions they take. I think many of them are misunderstood. I think a lot of them are not presented well. But look at the facts on the ground. Most of the construction is within the footprints of existing communities. I don't think that there are many new settlements or have been many new settlements built in many years. And the agreement is that those areas, those blocks that are going to remain with Israel, should be permissible to build there, and because that Israel will retain, and they will swap land, they will do whatever will be arrived at in the agreement, should the Palestinians really be prepared to sit down and negotiate. I think the change in the Arab world will help facilitate that. But the only way that you're going to come to an agreement is if there's some understanding that we're going to have Palestinians living side by side with Israel, a Jewish state, live in security, recognize each other, and I think in generations to come, they will be close allies.
By the way, what do you think of Mahmoud Abbas's decision to make a legal issue over the Balfour Declaration?
I think it goes between the ridiculous and the obscene.
Yes.
And the fact that he's demanding that Britain apologize and that it should be a reminder to the world that the great powers supported the creation of the state, and they recognized the Jewish homeland, that it wasn't something that grew out of the Holocaust, as some say, that this was the reward for the deaths of 6 million. We have 3,000-year claim to Jerusalem, and this was recognized then. It was recognized many other times. And for him to go after the Balfour Declaration shows that he's not serious, that he's not advancing the interests of his people, that he is always looking to create the showmanship, and it's a false start.
All right, Malcolm, talk to me now about this U.S. aid package to Israel, $38 billion to Israel over 10 years. Some of the criticisms of it have been all the monies that Israel receives must be spent inside the United States. In the past, Israel could use 25% of the money given to Israel in aid outside of the United States, but now 100% of it must be in Israel. And in the United States. And some congressmen, Lindsey Graham's an example, wanted to actually give Israel more than $38 billion over 10 years, but the president refused to go along, and therefore there seems to be some controversy over how much joy there should be over this aid package. What's your overall sense of this memo of understanding regarding U.S. aid to Israel?
Well, one, I think it is a very generous gesture for part of the United States to provide tens of billions of dollars in aid to Israel under any circumstances. And it's a reflection of the fact that this is in America's national interest, that this is seen as not just, it's a gesture of friendship, it's a recognition of Israel's unique role as a democracy in the region, and of the important role that Israel plays in defending America's interests and being the bulwark against terrorism, and has been for 5 decades. It reflects many things. Some of the criticism is that the amount of money, the increase, is really offset by the cost increase of the products they're buying, that from the 5th year on, the 26% that was allowed to be spent in Israel, which helped Israel's domestic arms industry and helped to develop a lot of the technology that American troops are using and saving a lot of American lives and other lives as well, whether it's tank armor or things to pilot, the special technology and avionics for airplanes and jets that both countries use, many other things. But after the 5th year, it starts to cut down, so by the 10th year, 0% will be allocated to spending in Israel. They also are concerned that, the stealth fighters started at $50 million and now we're up to $200 million. So the increase, doesn't mean that they're going to get more equipment,
yes,
because the price has gone up so
yes
much. But I think it's an important statement to the region at a time when everybody was emphasizing, that Israel and America are estranged and that the tensions. This is a statement about the depth of the relationship, the appreciation for Israel, the mutual appreciation and recognition. People don't write about the massive joint exercises that take place in Israel and in the Mediterranean with them and with other countries as well participating. They only want to write about the bad. So this is a statement, I think, of the depth of the relationship. The tension about Congress's role, about the elimination of the appropriations role, as some congressmen have said, and saying
yes,
that they do not like the idea that
yes,
Israel cannot go to Congress for additional monies. They can under certain circumstances, but I understand why members of Congress were upset. I hope that this can be resolved. We don't want to see the aid to Israel becoming a partisan issue or a political issue. In this case, both Democrats and Republicans criticized it. I hope that this can be resolved and that future aid for other things will be continued. I have no doubt that Congress really appreciates Israel in such overwhelming numbers and wants to continue to see Israel safe and secure.
Beautifully said. And of course, it reflects the general American sentiment about Israel.
Absolutely.
All right. Before coming back from Denver, you came back from Israel. You were there for 9 hours. You spoke at a conference, but you also had the chance to meet the family of Shimon Peres at the hospital. I told you I thought it was a very, very menschlichkeit loving thing for you to do. But tell our audience, what was it like when you met with the family, and what's their feeling right now, and what can we know about the health of Shimon Peres?
I know there are people who are critical of him, but I want to remind them that Israel's military was largely developed under his leadership, that Dimona, Israel's nuclear program, so many other things, and his massive contributions to the creation of the state. And I had the privilege of working with him in his many capacities, Prime Minister, Defense Minister, Foreign Minister, and President. And I felt really compelled. I needed it for myself, let alone as a gesture to the family, to go there, and they were very appreciative. I spent a long time there with his son and his son-in-law, who's also his doctor. I think Shimon's condition obviously is very serious.
Yes.
I'm not a doctor. I don't want to make any prognostications about it, but we should remember and think about his immense contributions his whole life. I mean, he's 93 years old and 94 years old, and the bulk of that time was spent from the time he was a young man and came to Israel in building the state.
Absolutely.
And we should celebrate his life and his contributions, and God willing, he will have a recovery and continue. He's one of the few statesmen in the world recognized, even in countries that don't necessarily like Israel, always celebrated Shimon Peres and saw him as a man of peace and a man of vision. You know, he was the first that I remember talking about nanotechnology, and then I went to the Jerusalem Foundation for the kickoff of the 50th anniversary of Jerusalem's reunification and the celebration of the 50th anniversary of the foundation, founded by then Teddy Kollek, another great leader of Jerusalem, who was the mayor, legendary mayor of Jerusalem. And then I turned around and came home because we had all these UN meetings.
Yeah. By the way, it would just be wholly inappropriate now for any Jew to make a political statement about Shimon Peres, whether you agreed with his approach to peace and his approach to Israel or not. This was, as you say, a giant who helped create the state of Israel, and it will be very sad to ever lose him, and I'm so glad you represented all of us at the hospital. Malcolm, I don't know how you do it. You know, I said to you before, you have the energy of a 25-year-old, and you are going everywhere, not for yourself, but you're going for us. You're going for the Jewish people. You're going to help build bridges and make things understood and bring clarity, as I said at the beginning of our discussion. You bring clarity everywhere you go. There are many, many people in this Jewish world, Malcolm, who I have enormous regard for. I'm able to talk to them. What a privilege I have talking to them all the time at JBS. None of them mean to me what you have meant to me, Malcolm, almost for 40 years. Really, we started doing this back in the 1970s and early 80s. You then became the voice of the President's Conference, and since then, you have gone out of your way to help me get the message out to the Jewish and non-Jewish community of America. You have been an extraordinary friend, and you've done extraordinary service to the Jewish people. We are all more grateful to you than you can possibly understand. And as we are in this high holiday season, I wish for you and your large, beautiful family, Shana Tova Mituka, you should have a happy, healthy, sweet, good New Year. And I hope it's one in which I get a chance to talk to you and share you with the community of America, Jewish and non-Jewish, many, many times on JBS. But Malcolm, I love you dearly, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Well, you know, it's mutual, and I thank you, and I think this time we should be reminded not to take for granted, because they don't pay for JBS. JBS has to be paid for, so that people should think about the services that they get because of information, et cetera, throughout the week, throughout the year. And especially this time when we have so many serious challenges, so many issues, and we will likely have many in the months ahead. We will have many commemorations, not only the 50th anniversary of Jerusalem, the 100th anniversary of the Balfour Declaration, the 70th anniversary, many occasions to celebrate, and we have good reason to celebrate and much to celebrate. We need unity coming together within the Jewish community and with our Christian and Muslim neighbors, with people of all faiths, to recognize what we have in common and to stand together and to advocate one thing, and that's the truth. That's our strongest weapon.
You go from strength to strength, Malcolm. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Tova. There you have it, the thoughts of Malcolm Hoenlein, Executive Vice Chairman of the Conference of Presidents of major American Jewish organizations. He's doing just fabulous work on behalf of the Jewish people, the State of Israel, and American Jewry. If you never met him before, now you have. I'm so pleased to be able to bring him to all of America. Before we close, all of us here at JBS send our best wishes to Shimon Peres and his family. We do have enormous appreciation for his lifetime of devoted service to the State of Israel and the Jewish people. And we wish him refuah shlema, complete healing and recovery as soon as possible. My thanks, as always, to our director, Sloan Copeland, production coordinator, Serge Goldberg, editor, Dennis Golan, JBS's associate director, Dara Golub, and the producer of In the News, Carol Lilienthal. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.